Good Monday evening, everybody. Welcome back to Let's Talk Live here on the LTL Media Channel. It is October 7th, and I'll tell you, the back end of this year is going by so quick. I can't believe it's fall already here in New England. The leaves are falling. The weather is changing. It is getting cold out at night, but us New Englanders, we love this time of year. I just don't, the snow, but it's nice to see all the Go Squad members in here. It's nice to see my moderators here tonight and any new subscriber that's come over and check out the channel this evening. But I have a very amazing guest and a very amazing human being that I've gotten to know over the last couple of months. And I'm going to bring him in a minute, but I want to do this is just give you a little intro. If you don't know who Collier Landry is. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Collier Landry, creator and subject of a critically acclaimed documentary, A Murder in Mansfield, directed by two-time Oscar winner Barbara Kopel. In 1989, just at 11 years old, Collier bravely reported the tragic murder of his mother by his father, becoming a key witness in the 1990 trial that changed his life forever. Abandoned by his family and facing foster care system, he was emerged as a passionate advocate for those who have faced unimaginable adversities. Collier's documentary confronts his past highlights and resilience of the human spirit, while he also shines as a sought-after keynote speaker. He's done a TED Talk. It's pretty cool. Multiple #1 best-selling author, host of a podcast, Moving Past Murder. His work has been featured on outlets like Vanity and the New York Times, and he's also appeared on the Dr. Phil show. I'm not going to wait too much longer. Let's bring him in. Collier, welcome to Let's Talk Live. How you doing?
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm well. I have to laugh because I was getting ready to comment to your viewers, and it said subscribers only mode, and I'm like, wait, I'm not subscribed to his channel. Like what? Like what is? This is but this is the second time in the last 2 days that this has happened. I've gone to a channel that I know I was subscribed to. And I went on to comment on something and it said subscribe. And I'm like, I've been subscribed to this channel for well over a year. How does this happen?
You know what, though? I have heard that because even like members of mine or subscribers saying that that's been happening a lot. Like people have been, they've been like taken off and they're like, I had to resubscribe to your channel. So it might be like a YouTube thing, but who knows?
I think that probably is. I'm not what are you going to do? Who knows? But anyways, thanks so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I was wondering where you picked that bio up. Was that just like out in the ether on the interwebs? You're like,
it was on the ether, and I kind of tailored it a little bit. But I just wanted to have a nice intro and welcome you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so cool that we connected. I mean, obviously we connected over the Karen Reed trial, but we have gotten to know one another over the last several months. And, I grew up a very passionate Boston Celtics fan.
That's awesome.
And we talked about that a little bit because I told you the story of when, and I live in Los Angeles. I've lived here for the better part of 20 some odd years. Right. And I remember when we were playing in 2008, my buddy sent me, I had the Beat LA green.
Yep.
Kelly Green Beat LA. And I remember I would walk around with my chest out. I was walking down Sunset Boulevard and people are flipping me off, honking.
That's so funny.
It was kind of I mean, I went nuts when we won. Also growing up in Ohio, I went nuts in 2016 when the Cleveland Cavaliers won.
Yes.
The NBA championship, and I thought, there's nothing better. But anyways,
no, listen, I did something today. I did something today. I actually I sat down for the first time and watched your documentary, A Murder in Mansfield, and I want to be very transparent with everybody here in the chat. And Collier can attest to this. I've never once talked to him, getting to know him about obviously, what happened in his life, and I knew that one day when I had him on the show, I wanted to have this opportunity to speak with him and get it organically. And I didn't want to, I just wanted to know, like I said, we connected over the Karen Reed case. And really, we text each other like every couple of weeks. How are you? How you doing? And I wanted to build that relationship first before I got, the opportunity to really speak with you and get kind of deep. But so I did. I went to the gym this morning. I came home. I went to Amazon. I rented the documentary, It is very well done. It is an amazing documentary. I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me. It had me hooked within 10 minutes watching it. And I could say at least 3 times through the documentary, waterworks. And it's a very powerful documentary. I would urge everybody to watch that, watch it. And you know, I want to just start this off. Like, what was it like going back 26 years later and kind of pursuing almost this therapeutic journey and going back to Mansfield?
Sure. Well, I do want to do a shameless plug really fast. If you guys do want to see the film, you can purchase it on my website, on my store. You can purchase it through my YouTube channel. I thought I sent you a link to it, so I feel bad you bought it through Amazon, but
I didn't. Go to Collier's website and get it through there.
Yeah, go to the store, or you can go to my YouTube channel. No, but it's all good. However anybody wants to watch it, you find it's like it's on Hulu. It rotates on and off on Hulu. But okay, so here's the sort of thing, and you know, it's interesting how we met over like the sort of true crime stuff, right? Which is something that I have very little, if any, interest in, to be honest with you. I don't like true crime. I don't like the media, the overconsumption of this. I think it's horrible. I think it's you know, I pulled up something this morning. It's Court TV. And this, by the way, is I'm not excoriating or chastising anyone or admonishing anyone for consuming true crime. I understand. I talk a lot about it on my show, trying to understand people's, you know, quote unquote obsession or just generalized interest. Now, I'm somebody who like is fascinated with like financial crimes, like Bernie Madoff, for example, or Enron or things like that. I think they're like, how do they pull these things off, right?
Right.
But I think I always think that the overconsumption and talking about violence and seeing the ramifications of all this, and this was the impetus for a murder in Mansfield, right? So I'm getting to a point, I promise.
It's okay. Take your time.
I'm always very, as someone who grew up in true crime, because my life is a true crime sort of story. I was like, why would anybody just invite that into their world? Because it's one thing to see it and invite it. It's quite another thing to actually be thrown in the middle of it, which no one wants to be. And I know you have your own experience with the murder of your best friend and things. So you've been through your own stuff as well. But I think for anyone that's just actively pursuing it, like I'm watching sports, you know, or whatever, it always struck me. And then something that somebody said something to me a few months ago, because I had done a project last year with Vice about Americans' consumption of true crime. And somebody said something to me. They said, you know, people watch true crime and consume this content because they want to see justice served. And a lot of people, unfortunately, have dealt with injustices in their world, in their lives, growing up, etc. And you can, you know, whether you want to call it, you know, SA in the home or DV or something as crazy as a murder, or maybe they've dealt with someone who unalived themselves or something, to use all the YouTube things that we can't say in real life. Right. But you know, they're looking for this sense of justice and closure. And when I look back on that, that was the quest with making a murder in Mansfield. So it originally started as, you know, I went to music school, I dropped out of music school, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was like, I need to do something with my story. Something good has to come from this, whatever that is, right? Right. And I never knew if it would be like a television series, if it would be a movie, like a feature film starring actors, if it would be a documentary, if it would be a docuseries. I never knew what it was going to translate into. But I was like, I have to get this story out, because for me, it was so imperative to be able to move on from that. And the only way that I could essentially do that is just to put that to bed, right? And I started very early on in my career in Hollywood. Like I am still a working cinematographer. I was for well over a decade, and a filmmaker. And that's what my background is before I started my channel a couple of years ago and podcast. And so I became very fixated on, okay, I need to tell the story, but I also need to learn the craft to be able to tell the story. And one of the films that had really impacted me it impacted me when I was younger. I saw it when I was in college, and it was American History X. And
Mhm.
I remember leaving the theater with a friend of mine. And I said, whoever made that film, they understand the consequences of violence. Because growing up, even though true crime wasn't a thing, I think we had Unsolved Mysteries and Rescue 911
Rescue
or whatever.
911,
Yeah, it was cops.
Yeah.
Like that was about it, right?
America's Most Wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
America's Most Wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
there's very limited,
Right.
other than the media, like traditional media, pushing things like that. We had very limited. People weren't consuming that stuff.
Till the O.J. Simpson trial, and then Court TV spawned off that.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean? But it wasn't
Yeah.
like it was this huge
Yeah,
thing that
mass public
everything was
consume.
about. I mean, now you go into Netflix and there is a new show every
Right.
day, or Max, or what. It's unending. It's like, did we run out of islands for people to fall in love with while they're blindfolded? Like, why are we back to murder again?
Right.
But in all seriousness, the thing that I was I had a hard time coming to grips with was the fact that we as a society, we look at, okay, the bad guy goes to jail, the victim is dead, bad guy goes to jail, the state gets his restitution, the gavel hits, and we say next. And we never examine the impact of the crime, the ancillary victims, the impact on the community as a whole, how all of that impacts the world around, the blast radius, if you will, of these events, right? And I was obviously very acutely aware of this as a child. I thought, well, that story really needs to be told. So I see American History X, and I think, okay, that's like, wow, they get that. And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's one of my personal top 5 favorite American films of all time. And it is about the direct consequences of violence and sort of what you create, butterfly effect, whatever you call it, right? So I flash forward 8, 9 years later, my girlfriend at the time comes in to my office, and I'm, we're both actors and we're models and all that stuff. And she says, this guy wants to photograph me for a coffee table book. And he contacted me on MySpace. So this is going to date me and date us. Me on MySpace, and he wants to shoot me for this coffee table book. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. And she's like, he's a movie producer. And she starts rattling off the different movies that he had done from IMDb. And she says, American History. And I said, American History X? And she goes, yeah. I mean, he'd done like Booty Call and Kingdom Come and 11/14 and a movie called Havoc, which was directed by Barbara Koppel, who was also a 2-time Oscar winner for documentary films. And his name was John Morrissey. And I said, let's meet up with this guy. And John and I forged a friendship, but we still have to this day. Just talked to him this morning. And over a couple of years, he had seen me getting into film and cinematography and content creation. And he's like, and he wanted to do some project. And I said, look, John, I said, I got an idea for you. I want to do a docu-series about the consequences of violence in America. I said, the best news is I own the rights to this kick-ass pilot that we could do. I gave him this book that's sitting right here on my shelf, which was of newspaper clippings from my father's trial, from when my mother went missing, that I was given when I, became an adult. And I showed it to him, and I said, look, I said, this is my story. And he calls me the next day. I was like, holy shit, man, this is your life? Because no one knew in LA or in my circle really what my story was. They only knew that, like, okay, Collier comes from Ohio. He's adopted. His dad killed his mom. Like, it was very, very like surface details. I mean, like if somebody dated would know, but because they would know a little bit more of those details. But I just didn't really openly share with them any of that. And in fact, even after the film came out, I would still get messages from people saying, okay, so I did a whole 2 seasons of television with you, and I had no idea that this was your story. I had no idea where you come from. We always wondered, but you were talking about you were doing a documentary, but we had no idea, because everybody says, oh, I'm writing a script. Everybody's doing this. Everybody's doing this. So it was interesting to see the sort of genesis. But when I talked to John, he's like, look, I know somebody who's won 2 Oscars for documentaries, and I think she'd be really interested in that. So I ended up meeting with Barbara Koppel, and we kind of hatched a plan of like, hey, this is what we want to do. We were still going to do it as a docuseries pilot.
Right.
And then we just sort of hit the ground running, and then started making it. And it ended up becoming the documentary that you see now, which is A Murder in Mansfield. I was fortunate enough to travel around the world with it and speak to audiences, do a TED Talk, be on Dr. Phil, be on a bunch of shows, and use that as a springboard now for my podcast, Collier Landry Show, and the YouTube channel that people discover me on. And, get to be on shows like yours. I was just on Soft White Underbelly last week, and
so good. I'm so happy for you for that. It's really great. I mean, that's a huge platform in the YouTube space to get on. And
yeah.
It's just, it's great. That's really great.
Cool.
Really
it was cool. Well, Mark's my neighbor,
Mark's
apparently. So that's
oh, really?
He lives right down the street. When I was talking to somebody, they're like, "Oh yeah, he lives in San Juan." I was like, "Oh, right. Oh, I know where that's at." And we talk. I'm like, "Dude, you're like around the corner from me." No, it was great. That was one of those moments. And I had a friend that I went to grade school with that's known me through all of this, and she's like, "That's the best telling of your story I've ever heard." She's like, "And you know how much I love your movie, but the movie again is not about." To bring it back to your question, is not about like the crime or what happened. I mean, look, it opens with, the trial, tease it up. You see me on the witness stand as a kid testifying against my father. And then you see me as an adult and in a radio station at some ungodly hour at some ungodly temperature in the Ohio weather. It was like,
you looked tired when you were there.
Well, so come to the West Coast, and then they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be on the radio at 5 a.m." And I'm like, usually that's the time where I'm like, do I continue to stay up, or do I try to go to bed? Because that's like 2 a.m. my time. So yeah. So it and then it just sort of breaks in, and it kind of tells the story of everything, but there's a lot of it's not really it's as you were mentioning in the opening, Variety did a write-up on it, and they're like, it comes dressed as true crime, but it's really
I think it's a healing story
for humanity. It's really a plea for humanity. Story. Yeah.
I mean, and then when you get to the end of the documentary, I mean, you confront your father. You have this discussion for about 30 minutes. Well, what is in the film is this 30 minutes, and I'm just the whole time you're having this discussion with your father, I'm just shaking my head. He's like, he's not telling the truth. He's not facing, the reality of the situation. And I can see that dynamic back and forth with both of you. And, and then I was just wondering, like, you don't really say much, but as you're kind of walking out of the prison, I'm wondering what he's thinking right now. There must be so much going through his head. And I thought it was great at the end too, how you kind of summarize or end the whole documentary with a therapist again. And you were open with that. And I thought that was really great and admirable that you would put your vulnerability out there, not knowing your story, but having a camera in these counseling sessions as you're going through the docu. It's really great.
Well, here's the thing. When you do this, and from being an online content creator, one of the things I was really adamant about in making the film is it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
It has to be real. It has to be warts and all. Now, I mean, when I look back on it, I'm sort of mortified by my wardrobe because I wasn't going to be like on camera the whole time. It was supposed to be like me partially shooting part of it, which I did. We never put it in, but I shot part of the film and as a cinematographer, but also, we sort of, so I look at my clothes and I'm like, God, I look like I'm on set, like a grip, but no, in all seriousness, it was this moment that I said to Barbara, I was like, look, it has to be all out there, full Cleveland, everything has to be out there for everyone to see because it won't work any other way. So you have to see the vulnerability, the bringing the cameras into the therapy sessions, for example, the conversation with my father, I can remember, and, spoiler alert guys, but, when I'm looking at the case file and seeing the photographs of my mother's body, it's like the first time I've ever seen that. Now, for 2+ decades, I had imagined what those photographs looked like in my head, but never really, knew what they look like, And I can even remember Dave Messmore, who was the investigator and who I'm sitting there with, and he was like, we don't want to do this. I said, guys, this is what we're here for, to show people that you can be brave. You know what I mean? To show them you can have the courage to put yourself out there. And I think when you do that, when you show people you can have the courage to put yourself out there, it's so much more engaging with the audience.
Yeah.
Like, this is me, this is who I am, and take it or leave it. But you're going to get the real me, the authentic me.
And let me just get to this point, and then I want to just read off the super chat just so I can acknowledge it. But and then you even see it too. There's kind of the pause in the documentary. Dave kind of puts his hand over the book, doesn't want to turn the page, and he says, "Are you sure? Do you want to go forward?" And I thought that was nice and very respectful to him. And you're like, "No, let's just go, go forward with it." So let me just get to this. Kelly, thank you so much for a $5 super chat. She says, "I am from Knox County, and I hope you're proud of what you made yourself into, especially coming from shit Central Ohio. Love." I also got the F out of there ASAP. So Kelly, thank you so much for the 5. We do appreciate it.
Kelly. Shout out to the Knox County Fair. I went there a couple of times.
It's awesome. And if you're just coming in, I know that we have some people kind of filtering the room. If you could smash the like button in here. Again, I'm with Collier Landry today, where we're kind of talking about his life story. If I can do this, Collier, if I can take you back, just a quick question. So you're 12 years old, you're on the world stage, you're up there testifying against your father. Did you have the sense of, I think you did, but do you have really the sense of reality of what's going on at that time? Or is this still kind of, like, here I am, I'm going to have to stand up and testify against my father? What were your emotions and your feelings going through at that point?
So, I mean, first of all, I remember having a conversation with the prosecutor, James Mayer Jr., probably so that was June I was testifying. I want to say May of that year. And he's like, "Look, you don't need to testify." And I remember saying something that my mother would always say, which is, "Over my dead body." Like, over my dead body, I'm not testifying. The thing is that, and this, I say this a lot when I talk to young people, right? I go speak at a college or in, classroom or wherever. There are these really defining moments in your life. I mean, and you have to be able to recognize that if you don't do what in your heart is right and is true, and be authentic, not to overuse that word, but be your authentic self and do what's right. If things don't work out, you're going to have to face that for the rest of your life. And I knew, look, my father had a high power legal team. My father was very manipulative, and I knew what happened. I heard him murder her.
Yeah.
I heard the murder happen. I'm the one who contacted my mother's friends and said, "Call the police." I knew he was lying to me when he said, "Oh, she got up in the middle of the night. We got into a fight and walked out." I knew he was bullshitting me. And then I continued to gather evidence and found the house where they found her body in another state. And one person believed me, and that was Detective David Messmore. So the reality is that there was no way that I was going to just let this slide or not be in that room and not stare him down as I'm testifying. And you know what? He would never look at me. Never looked at me. And that was something that, and let me be very honest, it was terrifying, because the part of you is, you want to do this, you took my mother from me, you're going to pay the ultimate price.
Right.
You've destroyed our lives. But also the fact of the matter is that I also know that if he is not convicted, I will most likely go back and live with him, and he will have his way with me for the rest of my, at least while I'm under his roof,
Yeah.
or I could myself end up in a hole somewhere a couple years down the road. Remember that time when you thought I killed your mother? Psh, psh, you know what I
You
mean?
spoke about that in the documentary too. You said, hey, we could, if he gets out, we go to Disney, Disney World or Disneyland, and I don't come back. There's some tragic accident in a pool or the ocean. I forget what you
Well,
had
yeah,
said.
I was talking about, because that was before he was arrested, because he said that he wanted to take me on a father and son trip. That was when the walls were closing in on him, because for 3.5 weeks before he's arrested, I'm living with him and I'm gathering evidence, and every day going to school and giving that evidence to the police. Like when I find the house, when I notice the bruises on his arms, when I see the cuts on his hands, when I find that his behavior is getting off, the fact that my mother, that his lawyer is there every night. I mean, I'm feeding everything to Dave Messmore every day I go to school, because that was the safe place, and it's odd when you think about it now that like a child could be doing that. What's up, Gen X to the 7th power? Thanks for the super sticker.
Thank you.
She's one of my mods, so she's fantastic.
Thank
you. So it's hard to imagine, first of all, that ever taking place nowadays, right? It's hard to imagine that, because the trial was televised, so I was on television, which is a whole other situation. But the thing is that when he says like, I'm going to take you to Florida, I told Dave Messmore, the detective, I said, I'm not coming back. I've been able to swim since I was 4 years old. I'm going to drown in the Gulf of Mexico. And find out years later, and when I was interviewing the judge for my father's trial, is he had a fixer in Florida. Like, he had somebody to take care of stuff for him, because he had stalked girlfriends down there, because my father had many girlfriends and fiancés while he was married to my mother. It's a whole wild situation.
Yeah. It's another thing that I thought that was very interesting from the docu was you consistently wrote your father while he was in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be very interesting. And you always, in your letters, let him know what happened. And it was just very interesting, the dynamic where, he kept denying everything. Like, I did not do anything. I did not hurt or kill your mother. And then he got very angry at you and started resorting, I guess, back to things to your earlier childhood, and making fun of you, calling you these things, but then goes back into this when his parole hearings start coming up, goes back into this loving, and you're seeing the different dynamics, the manipulation. And I think you told that story really well in the docu, and it was just a very interesting thing that you were going through. It what made you write your dad so consistently? What, was that trying to get him to kind of come forward and say, hey, I had done this, or at least get maybe pieces to the story that you didn't know about?
Well, initially, early on, and that's the letter that I read that was sent back to me. Get another spoiler. You'll have to see the movie to know what I'm talking about. But, initially it was, I wanted answers, right? Because I just couldn't reconcile or understand with like why did you do this, and why do you deny doing it, and you've destroyed our family, and why did you just admit it, just come clean so everyone can move on, because that's all I want. I think that's all your girlfriend wants. That's where my half sister wants. It was people. Our family deserves better than this. We just need to just move on with our lives.
Yeah.
If you can just give us that. And he wrote refuse on the envelope and sent that back to me. That's the letter that I read him in the movie. But part of it was, I mean, look, I will never be able to escape the fact that this is my father. That will never change. And I will also never be able to hide the fact that I still love my father. Even to this day, I still love my father. He might be a horrible person, but I still love him. He's my dad. But a lot of it, it's such cognitive dissonance.
It's so wild.
Excuse my language. It's such a mind fuck.
No, it's all right. You can swear on the show.
But it's true.
But that's just wild.
It's the mind fuck of all mind fucks, right? When you think about it. But the thing is that you have to understand that a lot of this growing up, writing him, okay, I want this connection. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I'm also trying to slowly unravel the ball of twine in a way so I can, as an adolescent and as a young man, and try to come to grips with, like, am I this person? Like, how could he have done this? And if you listen to all the exterior factors surrounding me as a child, as a young man, as an adult, every time I get into a relationship and I tell what happened, and then they tell their friends or their family or whatever, they go, well, aren't you nervous? Aren't you scared that he could do that to you? I mean, his father's a murderer. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Which, again, that sounds horrible to say here. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, that's terrible. I cannot say that I wouldn't say the same thing if I had a daughter in the same situation. It's just human nature, right? So I'm always fighting those stigmas off, besides just trying to come to grips with the fact that my whole world was blown up at 11 and be a functional, normal adult. But then there's also this thing of, like, could I be this person? Is that ingrained in me? And if so, like, how do I fix that so I don't become this person? Or how do I understand this behavior? So there was a lot of, like, for lack of a better word, investigation going on with myself, and obviously self-discovery of, could this be something that could really be affecting me, or could affect me later on in life? You know, I need to be very careful about relationships that I engage in, or people that I engage with, because I wouldn't ever want this. I mean, the worst thing for me is, like, I have a recurring nightmare of, I was just thinking about it this morning when I was driving to the gym, you know, this whole sort of paranoia of ending up in a prison cell, right? Because I think about, oh, okay, I'm around my father's age, and you know, you just kind of, you go through this, right? Like I said, mind fuck, right? But I had to really try to get to know him, and also because in many ways, not only is half of my DNA his, but also, like, he's the last real living connection that I have to my mother.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I can't imagine.
You know,
I just can't imagine. Let me ask you about, so this never really get wrapped up in the docu, but you do make contact with your sister Elizabeth. Did you have you spoken to her since? Have you made any contact? Have you reconnected?
Well, I just left her a voicemail because she would never pick up. But no, the short and really only direct answer is no. I have not seen her since January of 1991.
So, Collier, this event happens in your life, and you eventually, you know, move out of Mansfield. Actually, before we go there, this is something that was never really explained, and you talked about. Let me just back up a little bit here, because I want to know a little bit. So, tell me about the house in Pennsylvania, and how do we get? So, your dad was planning to move to, you were planning to move to Pennsylvania, or
so my parents were going to get divorced when all this happened, and he was going to move his practice to Erie, Pennsylvania, with his then girlfriend at the time, who was pregnant.
Right.
I didn't know this, but then girlfriend at the time, which was, her name was Sherry Campbell, and they were going to move there or whatever. He was starting, you know, all he could ever do is tell me about, like, how he's starting a new life with this amazing family, and he's going to make sure that mine's destroyed, and he's going to move and start this whole new life in Erie, Pennsylvania. So what had happened with the house is, I had, during my mother's disappearance, if you will, and I'm on my amateur sleuth, you know,
you did a great job, by the way.
G-man.
Junior G-man. Yeah.
I went, and I wouldn't let my father out of my sight, right? So I'm at school during the day, but then he comes home, and we're having this, always dinner. I'm not gonna let him out of my sight. And he says, "Hey, do you want to come to my office with me and grab some paperwork?" And I say, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm not letting him out of my sight." So we stop at this gas station, and my father goes in, and I'm watching him through the glass, and I'm in the gas station. I just start rummaging through his truck, and I find 2 photographs.
Mm.
One is of a house that I've never seen before. And the second one was of his girlfriend, Sherry Campbell, with her 2 children sitting in front of a fireplace that was wrapped in plastic, like covered in plastic. And I had been in enough model homes in my life at that time that I was like, okay, this is like a new house, and she's in this house. This house.
Right.
This is the interior. You know, it wasn't that hard to figure out. The pictures are together, and I'm like, she knows she's attached to somehow. So the next day when I go to school, I call Dave Messmer and say, look, I found these photos. Let me tell you about this house thing. And that's ultimately where they found her body. Now, they were also able to locate that house from records and things like that. But anyways, they that was a pretty big discovery. And that was something that you know, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And that's ultimately where they found her body.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just want to ask one more thing about the docu before we go forward here a little bit, and we can talk about, you know, your work kind of coming out of this tragic situation and things that you've done. But I want to go back to your childhood home. Was it 616 in Mansfield?
Mm-hmm.
And when you actually went there, was that organic when you went? Did that family that was living there didn't know you were coming, or how
at
did
616 Hawthorne? Yeah, no, it was totally organic.
Wow.
So it's our first day.
You were really sweet. They opened the door. Annie
and Matt Trammell. Their names are Annie and Matt Trammell. Yeah. They're lovely people.
They were kind of first like, who's this guy? And then they're like, she was like, what did she say? I gotta fix my hair or something, like, you can come in.
It just was so funny. So we were outside the house, and Barbara hadn't flown in yet. She was stuck at the airport in New York, and she's on the phone with me. And we're lined up in the street in this small town. Like, there's 3 rental cars, and we're all outside talking. There's a camera. It's like not hard to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And like, we're all like, I'm from LA. The producers are from New York. The camera guy, he's also from LA. Like, we do not look like Midwestern folk.
Right.
And they're just like, and I'm on the phone with Barbara, and she says to me, she goes, I said, okay, we're here, Barbara. And she's like, so Collier, just go to the door and just knock on the door. Just because she's that type of person. She's like, I'll just go knock on the door. I'm like, I don't want to bother these people. Like I feel awkward and weird. She's like, oh no, they'll love you. Everybody loves you, Collier. Just go to the door and knock on the door. So that's what I did. And they were gracious enough to let us in, because the producers have been contacting the person who owned the home, but they lived in Florida and they never responded to anybody. So they let us in. They let us come in there with the cameras and film everything. It was beautiful. They were so lovely. And all of that is completely organic. And that's the best thing. That's the amazing thing about documentary films, is you have this opportunity for everything to be so cool and organic. And that's what it was. And I was
did they know what happened, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, look, everyone knows what happened.
Yeah.
You know, it's, I grew up in a very small town. I mean, you and I talk about, Canton, Mass, and all that stuff with the Karen stuff. Like, everybody knows everyone. Right. So it's the same sort of situation. And, and Kat was sort of out of the bag that we were coming there with cameras, etc. So
yeah, it's really great.
It's cool though, how it happened though.
Yeah. And I love what you say to kind of summarize it up when you look outside and you're standing in front of the house and you say, it's great. It's almost like a fresh coat of paint inside that house with a new family in there, and they're beautiful children, and they can create this new memory. And then you kind of summarize it up and say, I love that the heart shutters are still on the house, because my mom, always loved those, and it's kind of stood this test of time, and they're still there. And I'm telling everybody, please go to Collier's website. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. I've been dropping it throughout. You can watch the documentary there. I urge everybody to watch it. It literally had me hooked in 5 or 10 minutes. I was just hooked all the way through. And I said 3 times I had tears in my eyes. It's very well done. It's a great documentary. But so moving forward, you leave Mansfield, Ohio, you come out to LA. Kind of tell me about what happens when you start settling in LA, what kind of work you're doing. And you did a lot of advocacy work for, stress and trauma, and tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, so I moved out here, and I got into modeling, did that for a few years, acting work, and settled on you again wanted to do something with this story. So I'm like, I need to learn the craft of filmmaking, right? Through the way, mentoring a lot of young people, through mostly the film business, bringing kids on set, working with kids in foster care, you know, and not like I said, not using my story in a way of like again, because there's a lot of people that didn't know about it, but just saying,
Right.
hey, I grew up in the system. Hey, I'm adopted. Hey, this. So work with a lot of like different little initiatives with directors I was working with at the time. But like, hey, let's bring some kids from the school and let's work with them. Just underprivileged kids from minority communities, troubled communities, and just like, hey, like come learn something that's going to get you out of the environment that you're in right now. Like there's a better way, right?
Yeah.
So I leaned a lot into that, in my career, and then obviously with the telling of the story and then putting it out there and offering up the content that I do here on YouTube, on my podcast, when I do interviews just like this, again, offering people, who are struggling with a way to see that there's hope and beauty in the world, even when you might not think there is.
Yeah. It's funny, in going back to like what you said a couple of minutes ago about, kind of the impact and kind of that bubble that you live in and the reality that you live in when you're kind of in the moment in the place you are. And, we're seeing that here, and I'm kind of living that here in Massachusetts, being literally from my studio right here in Rentham, Mass, 10 minutes up the road is this huge trial that we just went through with the Karen Reed story. And like, I'm living it, I've been down to the courthouse, and that's actually how you contacted me, because you kind of came across some channels that were talking about the Karen Reed case at the time. And you said, hey, I saw you like outside the courthouse, and I wanted to, interview someone that was kind of like boots on the ground and living it. And it is kind of crazy when I think like when you see things on TV and, you see a particular story that's going on and you're so far away from it. And then when you're living it in the moment, it's just two totally different things. And, I had the opportunity to go in and sit in the courtroom one day, and I've been out with Karen and spent 4 hours with her and interviewed her like off the record. And, it's just wild. It's just such a wild experience. And it's very different when you're living something versus, watching it. And I don't think sometimes people really understand the impact of, what it does and how that kind of shapes and molds your life. It's wild. It's really wild. I don't know.
Well,
it's just a really wild thing.
And one of the things too was that I looked, I watched your stuff and I noticed you were using a Ronin RS3, I believe, or a Zhiyun. And I was like, yeah, this guy's a filmmaker. So he's like, he's got the gear, because that these are people of my ilk, right? I recognize my fellow filmmakers. I was like, oh, I gotta get to know this guy. He's doing some cool stuff. Because I was, as someone who's gone through the spectacle in the circus, to see the other side of like the circus outside the courtroom was just like, oh, and wherever it was, what was this, the city it was in, not Canton, but where the trial was,
Dedham, Massachusetts.
With
which
the
is right
little
next to
courthouses and the little old, very puritanical sort of feel to all of it. And I thought, okay, this just reminds me of like my little small town. And not that we have that type of setup, we have a major courthouse, but it's just this small town factor of it that, and when I see these types of things, like these trials, and I wonder if all of this had happened now, or even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe, things would have been a lot different, because you'd have the proliferation of the internet and social media. And then you have all these people. I think that's added a whole other new layer to the true crime, or just the obsession with these kinds of stories, right? I mean, look, speaking of Ohio, you have this woman, and I cannot, Katie Sarcy or Sancy, I talked about her the other day, with the what's in the rug, with the woman who's on TikTok says, we've dug up this rug, and it just turns, she goes from 5,000 followers on TikTok to like 3 million in a matter of days and hours, and 120 people, because they think there's like just the way that we swarm towards these stories now. It's I shudder to think like what would have happened with my situation in that time, because I always tell people, it was in a weird way like growing up like a child actor, because people saw
Yeah.
you on television, but like not in a fun, cool way, or like on
Yeah.
money, like you made a bunch of money and you have like a trust fund now. It was like in a really awful way, right? And you have this, but everybody knows you and they kind of watched you grow up on television in a way. Like, oh, I saw this little boy, and then I see him in high school, and then I see him and I see him when he's an adult, and then I see him on YouTube, and it's like people have followed your story the whole way, and it's just this sort of like phenomenon, if you will. It's very, very daunting.
Yeah, and like going back to, I think 1995, you have the O.J. Simpson trial that spawned Court TV at that time. They're pulling millions of viewers, through that whole streaming. The trial was like really the first time, such a long trial. You have the celebrity entity to it, O.J. Simpson. It's kind of like this Hollywood story of, rich and murder and athletes, and, it's just crazy. And I think, from that really started to kind of break open that age of, we're still kind of pre-internet there. It's just starting to come on the cusp. But then, Court TV gets more popular and it just blasts through and people just get pulled into all these stories. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, now you flick through Court TV or Law and Crime, and it's like, you feel like every other day there's just some public, there's a trial, or there's, this just happened in Florida, or it's crazy.
There's a lot of shit that happens in Florida too. No offense to Florida. And guys, if you're in the Tampa area, or you're on the west coast of Florida, you are in our prayers. I mean, come on, it's terrible. I mean, I'm very worried for a lot of my friends. Shout out to Cat Loves Catskills, Sarah Holman. They're on my channel. They're in St. Pete's, and my dear friend, and Aunt Shelley Bowden, who is my mother's best friend. She lives there in St. Pete's as well. I'm worried about everybody over there. But yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of weird stuff. Everything's like a Carl Hiaasen novel almost. All this stuff that comes out of Florida. But to your point, I was watching this thing this morning. It popped up on YouTube, whatever, Court TV, and it was this. And I don't know what possessed me to just like watch it, because it's like it happened, and I'm normally watching like sports shows in the morning while I'm working out or doing work, and just like listening to Colin Cowherd on the FS1 or whatever. But I was listening to this, and it was a brother and a sister who had taken the life of their mother through neglect. They were in their late 40s. They were being sentenced to, whatever, 50 years in prison or something like that, the rest of their life. And I watched it and I was really gutted, because I'm just thinking, first of all, they put themselves in these positions. They should have just taken, because it's their mother, so it affects me in that way too, right? And I'm just like, why are we televising this? We know these are bad people, but like, why? And it's just the sorrow. And, I get it. There's a lot of schadenfreude that goes on in the world. And again, like I said, there are people that want to see justice. There are probably people who have dealt with elder abuse in their families. There are probably people that have maybe even dealt with, guardianship situations where loved ones have been taken away from the family by some third party for the sake of the court and for money or what have you, right? So we've all heard those stories too. But I just watched this and I just thought, like, what are we doing? Like, life is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Life is amazing, and there are plenty of problems in this world. Yeah. But let's maybe not invite as many of them into our own lives. And that's why I always say at the end of the show, if I am talking about true crime stuff, and I'm grateful with the Soft White Underbelly interview that more people have come to my content to sort of learn about my story and my healing process and my thoughts on mental health and surviving trauma and things like that in interviews that I've done, rather than like, let's just talk about true crime. Let's talk about this and this. Oh, this, because I always say it's like, when you have the luxury, like as an observer, you have the luxury of removing yourself from this. You turn the computer off, you turn the television off, you go about your day, you play with your kids, you cook dinner, you have dinner with your family, what have you, right? You have that luxury to move on. Whereas other people, this is their life. They are stuck in this. I was even just
Yeah.
looking at the attorney and his like tie and the way his like tie didn't match his jacket and his shirt. I just thought, like, is he just getting up and going through the motions? Like, okay, I got to go deal with this
Probably.
really horrible shit that I've got to listen to in the court, where this judge just by law gives these people just checks off their life. There you go. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison.
It's funny that you say that, because I never really intended my channel to be like a true crime channel. I mean, what we're doing today is what I always planned that I wanted to do here. I just want to hear people's stories, you know, and how they, you know, whether it be, you know, any story, and just hear how, you know, what got you to talking to me, you know, like, this is crazy. You know, I've never met you in my entire life. And, you know, we go through our lives on different paths, and yours goes to the right, mine goes to the left. And then all of a sudden, you know, the power of the internet, we're talking about something very similar. You come across me in my videos, and, you know, we start formulating this, you know, friendship, and we're talking, and it's like, here you are, you know, like, that's the guy that I saw on TV, you know, like, life is fucking weird, man. Like,
but it's cool. But it's cool too. You're like, how, where else can we do this? And we have people watching, and it's like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That we can have these conversations, and we can talk about these things. And these are the conversations. Again, these are the things I vibe on. You know what I mean? It's like I love the banter back and forth, and you know, that's the stuff that really, you know, gets me going, right? But it gets technology is amazing. Like, the internet is amazing that we can just do this. I can just sit here in LA, you're in Boston,
Massachusetts,
you know, Massachusetts, and it's like, you know, it's incredible, and we're so fortunate to be able to do this. And again, it's, you know, and I'm never trying to chastise anyone for the content they consumes or anything like that. They consume, rather, or anything like that. But sometimes I just think that people I always say, like, just take a break, go do this, go for a walk, play with the kids, play with your dog, you know, do something beautiful, you know, wonderful with your life, because life is beautiful, and it's also hard enough. I always tell people, it's like, you know, you always want to all about solutions, right? People got enough problems. They just want to hear solutions. Just give me solutions. That's it. I want to hear your problems. I want to hear solutions. And look, we all kvetch, you know, my dating life is like a perpetual dumpster fire. I know you can relate to that. You know, like, we talk about these things, and, you know, it's not, you know, it's not going to be, it's, you know, not everything is roses, but I think if we can offer conversations like this that uplift, that offer people solutions, not problems, and like, hey, this is how you can lead a good life despite whatever your circumstances are, that ultimately is like the coolest thing, in my opinion, to be able to do.
No, I agree. And, you know, like, I'm a huge believer in fate. Like, I think that all things happen for a reason. There's obviously a reason that you and I have intersect, and, you know, I could turn the camera off and we may never speak again, but there's a specific reason why we did speak. And I know that wouldn't happen, because I know that we would talk again, but I'm just saying, you know, I'm a big believer in that. And, you know, it's wild, man, when you just sit here and you're like, why did all this stuff happen to me? But it had to happen to me so I could get to this very point in this very moment. I don't know. It's just some trippy stuff. Like,
so it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because when I talk to people a lot about my story or what have you, or just tell them, you know, this is what I've been through. The thing that I always really want to make abundantly clear to people is that, and I've said it maybe, albeit poetically, but I've been like, you know, it's very difficult when they talk about my father, right? It's very difficult to hate someone who you feel like destroyed your life, but also saved it at the same time. And I know that that might be like a bitter pill for people to swallow, but at the end of the day, and do I wish things are different? Of course. Do I wish I had like a normal life? Do I wish I could like look at life through a quote normal lens? Sure. But I don't. And these experiences that I've been through have shaped the person who I am. And I genuinely like that person that I am.
Yeah, do you have reservations about people when you meet them? Like, do you tend to now we're getting into therapy now. Do you tend to like overanalyze situations? Because I feel like I do, knowing the situations that I've gone through in my life. You know, my best friend was murdered. My brother committed suicide. You know, I have all my childhood trauma that I've dealt with, and I tend to do that. And I will be honest with you people, and I have been honest with people here. I am in therapy, and I urge everybody to get into therapy.
Amen.
It's one of the best things that can happen for someone. Even if they have the ability to do it, or just talk to someone outside your sphere, in a different person looking in at you that has no reservations, no assumptions about who you are, can give you straight facts. I urge everybody to do that, but I want to circle back.
And you urge them also to go to, have you tried BetterHelp? Please go now to BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/Brian LTL to save 25% off your first month with BetterHelp. Find the therapist that you need.
Hey, when I need my voiceover, I'm going to call you. But seriously though, do you tend to kind of do that knowing, what you've gone through in your life and because I do. I mean, I so do.
I mean, here's the thing. When you were asking me the question, I wanted to just jump in and be like, no. In fact, I need to learn how to do better with that. I am still someone who believes in the good in humanity. Mm-hmm. I take people at their word, which is why I get upset a lot with people when they break their word, because I'm like, well, I'm always my word. If you hear, I'm a straight shooter. One of the best things that I hear when people talk about like meeting me, or they're watching the show and they're like, I've met Collier in person, and the guy that you see right in front of the camera is the guy that you see and talk to in person. He is the same person. There is no bullshit with this guy. He's just who he is. And yeah, I get hurt a lot. I tend to overthink things, especially in romantic relationships. Yeah. Unfortunately, I tend to overthink a lot of things or feel a certain type of way. And it often sometimes gets me in trouble, or, hurts more than it should probably hurt. But like, I'm not going to change that, because I genuinely like that person. I'd much rather be someone that leads with an open heart and open mind than somebody who is just cold and paranoid and suspicious of everyone. That's exhausting. Like, it is exhausting getting strung along, or having people taking advantage of your good nature. But it is way more exhausting to lead life in just a perpetual state of paranoia or just mistrust of everyone around you. I can't do it. I can't. I've never wanted to do it. I won't ever do it. Take it from me. I've been through a lot of shit in my life. It's easier just to lead with an open heart and just be like, you know what? I'm throwing caution to the wind. We'll see what happens. But you know what? I said this to somebody. I was in and out of a relationship, and I said, look, there is no shame in defeat, for not everyone makes it into the ring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No. Not everybody gets to step in the ring and put the gloves on in life and really live it. So you take your licks and you move on, right?
Mm-hmm. So, no, it's
more wisdom. Go to collierlandry.com.
More wisdom. Collier and Brian.
Wisdom for you. Our coaching program starts next month. You can sign up at collierlandry.com.
So future projects, what do you have in the works? Do you have anything that's coming up that people should be paying attention to? Anything where they can go to get your information?
I actually do. So I have my YouTube channel, and I have my podcast, The Collier Landry Show. Please subscribe to both. Please go to Apple and give us a 5-star review. Please give us some reviews, good reviews on Apple and Spotify. Please subscribe to my channel. I enjoy most talking about mental health and telling stories, having conversations like we're having right now, sharing good stuff. I have a new series that is coming out on oxygen.
Awesome.
They're doing a 10-part series. I believe it is called A Time to Kill. I'm one of the episodes. It is about how myself and Dave Messmore and how we worked together to solve my mother's murder. And then I have a podcast that's coming out next year on Sony.
Great.
And also in conjunction with Apple, also about that same story. It's going to be a limited series. I'm doing that. I always have content on my Patreon, on my member section here on YouTube, youtube.com/Collier Landry. Everything you can find on me is Collier Landry across all socials. I have a large TikTok following, things like that. Follow me on all the things for all things Collier.
Yeah.
But a lot's coming out,
That's
I'm always
great.
active doing stuff, and I'm
always
creative.
Busy. He's like, every time I text him, we'll text like every couple of weeks, and he'll be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Or I'll tell him, "How you doing?" And I'm serious. Like because I have him like in my Instagram, stories, or I'll go to his channel and say, "What's Collier up to?" And I'll have like kind of this thought, and then all of a sudden he'll text me and be like, "What's up going on?" I'll be like, "Dude, we have some like weird mind connection." He's like, "Why? Did you just were you just thinking about texting me?" I'm like, "Yeah, like it's weird." And it's a great connection that we have, kind of this long distance thought connection that's going on.
It's cool, yeah.
Before we wrap, let me ask you, one question. If you can look in the camera and just say, what would be your message to the world?
My message to the world would be that you can go through seemingly insurmountable odds, unspeakable circumstances, and come out the other side and be okay. You might be bruised, might have broken a bone or two, but ultimately you're going to make it through and you're going to be okay.
No, I definitely agree. We all go through life is crazy. Life is is a roller coaster. It's wild, but it's amazing that we're here. It's precious that we're here. We're here in a very short amount of time, and we need to make the best of it as we can in this moment. And I always use this, and it's funny because it's a WWF or WWE wrestler, the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh yeah.
He said the guy Jim Hellwig, that was the guy that played Ultimate Warrior, for people don't know. He says this saying, and he used to always say, "Just because you're born, you have the potential." And I truly believe in that. And I think that's a very powerful statement. And, you are going to have to make it happen. And, I've said that, from day one, that you have all this shit that could flood into your life, and you could sit there and get consumed by it, or you can step up and shed it and try to do something great in the world. And that's why I wanted to start this platform. And I've been blessed to talk to some really amazing people and have some really amazing people on this podcast, and you are one of them. I've really appreciative and been very appreciative getting to know you. And I'm hoping I have the opportunity. Actually, I know I will have the opportunity someday to shake your hand and meet.
Oh yeah, for sure, man.
And I definitely want to do that. So
absolutely. Well, we'll make that happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So that is Collier Landry. I will drop his website here in the chat. Please go over and watch the documentary through his website. You can purchase it there. It's called A Murder in Mansfield. And I urge everybody that's watching this podcast.
Or on my YouTube channel.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The store on my YouTube channel. Yep.
Perfect. We can get it there. And please go over and subscribe to Collier. It's just Collier Landry, correct?
Yep.
Collier Landry. Please subscribe over there. He has nightly live streams. You're always on. And I always pop in the chat once in a while and check out what's going on. But
yeah, we're ramping up more production now too, because I do client work, and it's like, oh god, I get this and that. But there's more stuff coming, a lot more stuff coming on the channel, so I'm really excited.
Awesome. And Collier and I actually filmed an episode back in June, and we talked about,
it wasn't June, it was July. Yeah, or August like 1st, I thought, but maybe not. It's got to come out too. I know.
And that's we talked Karen Reed, so that should be out soon. So
very soon.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you jumping on with me tonight. I appreciate this time. You're a super cool dude, and it's been a pleasure getting to meet you, and let's continue.
Likewise, man. Likewise. Let's do this again sooner rather than later, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We're going to hit the outro here. If this is your first time here on the channel, please subscribe down below, comment, let me know what you thought here, and go subscribe over to Collier's channel on YouTube as well. Check him out via his website. I've been dropping the link throughout the show, and definitely check out the documentary, A Murder in Mansfield. It tells his story, and I appreciate him coming on tonight and telling us a little bit more about his life and his story. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Take care.
Good night, guys.